Okay, so let's continue on here. Now what we are going to do is we are going to calculate the correlation coefficient. Right. So in order to calculate the correlation coefficient, what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to make ourselves a table. So what we'll have here is we'll have x values. And once again, we are using the example from earlier. So these are the x values, right? These are the x values. And these will be the y values. Okay. So our x values consist of 12, right? We had a 5. We have a 14, 13, 8, 10, 16, 11, 12, and 4. All right, those were our x values. After we calculate our after we list our x values, we then list our y values. Once again, I'm not making these numbers up. These numbers are specifically coming from this table. All right, so don't forget they're coming from that table there. Okay, so the y values from that table were 1, 7, 2, 3, 5, 4, 1, 2, 3, and 10. All right, so this is the first thing that we do, list the x values. The second thing, we list the y values. Now we're going to multiply x times y. All right, so 12 times 1 is 12. 5 times 7 is a 35. 14 times 2 is a 28. And you just continue on this track there. If you need to pause the video, you can. Right, but that's the third thing we do, right, is we calculate x times y. The fourth thing that we're going to do is we're going to do each x and we're going to take it to the power of 2. So what is 12 to the power of 2? That gives us 144. What is 5 to the power of 2? That gives us a 25. What is 14 to the power of 2? That gives us a 196. And you just continue. Once again, if you need to pause the video, go right ahead. And the fifth thing that we're going to do is now we're going to calculate y to the power of 2. So now each one of these y's, what's 1 to the power of 2? What's 7 to the power of 2? What's 2 to the power of 2? And you just continue on. Pausing the video if needed is okay. Okay, so once we have done these 5 steps, the next step, how do I get this out? Your 6th step, all right, sixth step is to sum each column. So all you're doing is adding all of these numbers up. All right, so we add all of those numbers, we get 218. Right, so we sum every one. You sum this next column, and you're going to get 1,235. You sum the next column. So that's all we're going to do. We're just going to add each one of those columns up, and we write that down in the bottom, okay? And our sixth step is to sum those numbers up. And if you need to pause it, you can, but these should be the totals that you get. And each one of these has a specific labeling, right? So we talked about this in the past. This, because we summed x, right, we use our notation, what looks like this e of x. We summed y, so that would be e of y. We summed x times y, so that's e of xy. Remember, that means for summation. E of x squared, e of y squared, right? Because once we have all of this, we can go ahead and use our correlation coefficient formula. Right, and our correlation coefficient formula is definitely a long formula. I'm going to put a long fraction line, let you know that it's pretty lengthy. In the bottom, we're going to have 1 square root times another square root. Here we put n, open parentheses, our e of x to the power of 2, close parentheses, minus open parentheses, our e of x, close parentheses, to the power of 2. This next square root symbol, basically the same thing. The only difference is instead of x, we're putting y's. All right, so we can see it's pretty long. And then the top would be our n, open parentheses, e of xy, summation of xy, minus open parentheses, summation of x, close parentheses, open parentheses, summation of y, close parentheses. So this is our formula for our correlation coefficient. I think I gave you about 3 or 4 problems on your homework to do just like this. One thing to note is that n is equal to the amount of ordered pairs, or in other words, points. So here, if we take a look, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 points, right? So this tells us that our n is, what did I say? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I'm sorry, 10. We don't want to include this last one. That was a summation, right? We don't want to include that. So our n is 10, right? We have 10 points. Okay, so now we can just start replacing. We have r equals, we put a 10. Our e of xy is right here, so that's 308. Minus open parentheses, our e of x is 105. Our e of y is 38. I'll make sure we have 2 square roots. So we have 10 open parentheses. e of x to the power of 2 is this one right here, 1, 2, 3, 5, minus, this just says e of x, which is 105, right? But then we're going to take that to the power of 2. Follow the same steps on the other square root symbol, right? 10, open parentheses, 218, close parentheses, minus, open parentheses, 38, close parentheses to the power of 2. Okay, so now this is where we use our calculator, and we want to be very careful. What you want to do is you want to put 3 calculations into your calculator, right? You want to put this, all of that, just like it, in your calculator, okay? Just what's inside the square root symbol in your calculator. Just what's inside the square root symbol in your calculator. Very important, do not enter the square root in your calculator yet. Right, so if you do everything correctly, you should be left with still a square root symbol in the bottom, multiplication, another square root symbol in the bottom, and the numbers you'll have at the top, you should be left with the negative 9, 10. In the first square root symbol, you should be left with 1, 3, 2, 5. And in the following square root symbol, you should be left with 7, 3, 6. Really important that you do it this way because it's going to be very beneficial as we continue on this homework assignment. Okay, now from there, what you can do is you can put the entire thing in your calculator. All right, and be very careful because you're going to notice that these have parentheses. And also, you do not want the square root symbols inside of each other. I've seen people in the past do square root, open parentheses, 1, 3, 2, 5, close parentheses, and then still have the square root, open parentheses, 736. You do not want to do that because that's not what that says. So you need to make sure that you get out of that square root symbol after you put the second close parentheses. Okay, so if you do everything correctly, this should give us a correlation coefficient of negative 0.92. All right, so these are the steps in order to find the correlation coefficient. And remember, what we are doing is we are working with this example, right? And the question that I had brought up is, what is our correlation coefficient? We knew it was negative because it was going downward. We see, in fact, it is really close to this negative 0.9. Therefore, making it a strong negative correlation. So a nice example on finding the correlation coefficient. Continuing on, one thing that we should also be able to do, right, is find a best fit line. All right, we should be able to find a best fit line, or also referred to as a regression line. And this is just a line, right, that, just like it says, best fits the data, right? So if we have points like this, we should be able to find a line, right, which we can call the regression line. Or in other words, a line in the form of y equals mx plus b. And that's what we're going to do next, right? What we're going to do is we want to find our regression line. So we want to find something in this form, which means we need to find M and we need to find B. So we have two formulas. Our M is N times the summation of X, Y, minus the summation of X times the summation of Y, over N times the summation of X squared minus the summation of X to the power of 2. And our B is the summation of Y minus M times the summation of X over N. So let's start by finding M. All right, M is N times, all right, we have our formula. I won't repeat it again. I know you're thinking, oh, this is a lot of work. But I want you to notice that this, all of this in our M is really the first parts of our R. These were numbers that we've already calculated. In fact, we did that and we got negative 910 and 1325. So you really don't have to redo anything, right? This is just going to be, right, we already found them, right? Negative 910 over 1325. All right, once again, just look at your R numbers. You're not reinventing the wheel or doing anything new. All right, so this should give you a negative 0.69. Now that we know M, we just have to calculate our B, which is our sum of Y minus M times the sum of X over N. And these numbers come from the top, our table. So our E of Y, right, is our 38. Our E of X is 105. And we already know that N is 10. And we also found our M. So this is 38 minus, all right, we get a negative 0.69 times our 105 over 10. And if we just do the top math, we get 110.45. And this ends up giving us a B of 11.05. Once again, we're rounding to the hundredths. And with our M, we round it to the hundredths. So now your equation is Y equals negative 0.69x plus 11.05. And from here, I can ask you any question that I want. Let's not forget that this was talking about the education that a person has and the score that they will receive on a prejudice test. So I can ask you something like, if someone scores a 9 on a prejudice test, what is their years of education? Right, so we use our formula. Remembering that Y stands for the score that they received, and X is the education. What is the years of education? We're looking for X, which means they gave us the Y. So all we're doing here now is just solving for X. So we're just doing some nice simple math, right? We subtract 11.05 to both sides. Cancels 9 minus 11.05 gives us a negative 2.05 equals a negative 0.69x. Last step would be to divide. Right, so we divide, and what do we get? We get 2.97. So if I asked to round to the nearest integer, this would be 3. All right, so this would be 3 years of education. And we can ask any question now. So it's really nice of how we can relate the scatter plot, correlation coefficient, and regression line.